The great hall on Zephyria Prime stretched higher than any building on Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the crystal floor, looking up at the 47 seats that held the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Each seat was different, built for the strange bodies of alien races that had ruled space for thousands of years. Jake wore his best uniform, the blue and gold of Earth's Space Navy. Next to him stood Ambassador Lisa Carter, her silver hair pulled, back tight and her face calm, even though her hands shook slightly. They had come here to save humanity's place in the Galactic Assembly, but Jake could see from the cold stares around them that they had already lost. The Vorthak Chancellor rose, from his seat high above them. He was 12 feet tall, with 6 arms and compound eyes that looked like black mirrors. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation machines that made alien words sound like harsh English. "The Assembly has reached its decision," the Chancellor said. His words echoed in the vast space. "The species known as humans will be expelled from our organization, effective immediately." Lisa stepped forward. "Chancellor, please reconsider. Humanity has served the Assembly faithfully for 193 years. We have contributed medical advances, engineering solutions, and our people have died protecting Assembly. Worlds." "That is precisely the problem," said the Zephyrian delegate. Her voice sounded like singing crystal. "Humans spread dangerous ideas wherever they go. 3 of our member worlds have declared independence in the past decade. All 3 were influenced by human concepts of self-rule and rebellion." Jake clenched his fist but kept his mouth shut. He had been in the Assembly military for 20 years and had seen human soldiers die protecting alien worlds. He had seen human doctors save alien children from diseases their own people could not cure. And now they were being thrown out like garbage. The Chancellor continued reading from his crystal tablet. "Humans are too aggressive. They expand too quickly. They ask too many questions and refuse to accept the natural order of things. Most dangerous of all, they teach other species to do the same." "What natural order?" Lisa asked, her voice getting louder. "The order where 47 species make decisions for 3,000 others? The order where entire worlds cannot govern themselves? The order where innovation is seen as a threat?" A low humming sound filled the hall. Jake realized it was the sound of aliens talking to each other in their own languages, probably discussing how rude the human woman was being. The Chancellor raised one of his 6 arms for silence. "The vote has been taken. 43 species voted for expulsion. Only 3 voted against. The decision is final." Jake wanted to know which 3 had supported them, but he knew it did not matter now. The numbers were clear. Humanity was not wanted here. "You have 72 standard hours to remove all human personnel from Assembly space," the Chancellor announced. "Any humans found in our territory after that time will be arrested and imprisoned." Lisa tried one more time. "Chancellor, our colonies house 800 million people. 72 hours is not enough time to evacuate everyone. Some of our settlements are weeks away by ship." "That is not our concern," said the Vorthak leader. "You should have considered the consequences before poisoning young minds with ideas of freedom and independence." Jake had heard enough. He stepped forward and looked up at the towering alien. "You call it poisoning. We call it teaching people to think for themselves." The Chancellor's compound eyes focused on him. "Captain Morrison, is it?" "Yes, we have files on you. You were one of the humans who helped the Kepler colonies break away from their mother world. You taught them to build weapons and resist authority." "I taught them to defend themselves from slavers," Jake replied. "The mother world was selling their children to off-world traders. The Assembly knew about it and did nothing." "The Assembly maintains order," the Chancellor said. "Sometimes order requires difficult choices. And sometimes order is just another word for control," Jake shot back. The hall fell silent. No one spoke to the Chancellor like that. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm, but he shook her off. The Chancellor leaned forward in his seat. "This is exactly why humans must go. You cannot accept your place in the cosmic order. You think every being should be free to make their own choices, follow their own path, build their own future. Such thinking leads to chaos. Such thinking led us to the stars, Jake said. While you were building your perfect, ordered society, we were exploring, discovering, growing. That is what you really fear. Not that we will cause chaos, but that we will show others there is a better way. The voting began immediately. One by one, the alien delegates pressed buttons on their seats. Red lights for expulsion, blue lights for keeping humanity in the assembly. Jake watched as red light after red light appeared on the great board above them. The final count was devastating. 43 red lights, only 3 blue ones. Jake wondered if the 3 supporters were the Kepler survivors, who owed their freedom to human intervention. It did not matter now. The human species is hereby expelled from the Galactic Assembly, the Chancellor announced. All trade agreements are void. All defense pacts are cancelled. All humans must leave assembly space within 72 hours. Lisa's shoulders sagged in defeat. 20 years of diplomatic work had just been destroyed in a few minutes of voting. Jake put his hand on her arm. "Come on," he said quietly. "We have work to do." As they walked toward the exit, Jake could hear the aliens talking among themselves. Some sounded relieved, others sounded worried, a few sounded sad. But none of them had changed their vote. At the door of the Great Hall, Jake turned back and looked at the 47 seats one last time. Then he looked at Lisa, who was wiping tears from her eyes. "You know what?" he said. "Maybe this is the best thing that ever happened to us." Lisa looked at him like he was crazy. "Jake, they just threw us out of galactic civilization." "No," Jake replied with a small smile. "They just set us free to build our own." 6 months had passed since the expulsion, and Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the largest fleet in human history move through deep space. 3,000 ships of every size and type stretched out in all directions around her flagship. Colony ships carrying families, cargo vessels packed with supplies, warships protecting the convoy, and research vessels searching for their new home. "Admiral, we are receiving the final count from the Logistics Division," reported Commander Gary Turner from his station. 793 million humans are now part of the Exodus. That includes crew members, colonists, and civilians from 412 worlds. Kate nodded, but kept staring out at the endless stream of ships. The evacuation had been a nightmare. Some colonies were so far from Earth that their ships would not reach the meeting point for another year. Others had been attacked by assembly forces who claimed they were taking too long to leave. 12 ships had been destroyed, and over 3,000 humans had died in those attacks. "Any word from the scout ships?" Kate asked. "Dr. Alex Barnes reports that his team has found something interesting in the target system," Gary replied. "He wants to speak with you directly." The main screen flickered and showed the inside of a research ship. Dr. Barnes appeared, his dark hair floating slightly in the low gravity. Behind him, Kate could see stars and something else, something big and metallic. "Admiral, you need to see this," Alex said, excitement clear in his voice. "We have discovered a network of space stations in the target system. They are ancient, probably thousands of years old, but they are still functional." Kate leaned forward in her chair. "Who built them?" "Unknown," Alex replied. "But they were not built by any species in the assembly. The technology is different, more advanced in some ways. And Admiral, these stations were designed for multiple species to live together. We have found living areas built for beings with different atmosphere needs, different gravity requirements, different body types." "Are they inhabited?" Kate asked. "No sign of current life," Alex said. "It looks like they were abandoned long ago, but the main systems are still running. Whoever built these stations, they built them to last." Kate felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. "How many stations are we talking about?" 17. "Major stations connected by transport tubes," Alex answered, "plus dozens of smaller platforms and manufacturing facilities. Admiral, this could house our entire population with room to grow." The bridge crew exchanged excited looks. Kate held up her hand for silence. "Dr. Barnes, I want detailed scans of every station. Check for any signs of traps, weapons, or automated defenses. If this seems too good to be true, it probably is. Already on it, Admiral, Alex replied. So far, everything checks out. The stations appear to be genuinely abandoned. After ending the call, Kate turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Nancy Woods, send a message to all ships. Tell them we may have found our new home. 3 days later, the first human ships arrived at the ancient station network. Kate stood in the main docking bay of what the crew had started calling Haven Station, watching as families stepped off transport ships and looked around in wonder. The station was huge, easily 10 times larger than any human-built structure. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. The corridors were wide enough for several different species to walk side by side without crowding each other. Maya Torres, the chief engineer for the colony project, walked up to Kate carrying a tablet full of readings and diagrams. Admiral, this place is incredible. The power system is completely self-sustaining. The life support can handle dozens of different atmospheric mixes, and the manufacturing facilities are more advanced than anything we have ever seen. Can we live here safely? Kate asked. Better than safely, Maya replied with a grin. We can thrive here. These stations were built by people who understood that different species have different needs. There are sections with Earth-normal gravity and atmosphere, sections with low gravity for those who prefer it, even sections that can be flooded with water for aquatic species. Kate watched as a group of children ran past, laughing as they chased each other through the wide corridors. It was the first time she had seen children playing freely since the evacuation began. What about defenses? If the assembly decides to come after us? The stations have shield generators that make our best ships look like toys, Maya said. Plus weapon systems we do not even understand yet. Whoever built this place, they knew how to protect themselves. Over the following weeks, more ships arrived every day. Not just human ships, but vessels carrying the other species that had chosen to leave assembly space. The Kepler survivors whose homeworld had been destroyed, while the assembly debated whether to help them. The Altair merchants, who had given up profitable trade routes to support human independence. Even a few small groups from assembly worlds who had decided that freedom was worth more than safety. Daniel Hayes, who had emerged as the political leader of the human exodus, called a meeting in the largest conference room on Haven Station. Representatives from all the refugee groups attended, along with ship captains and colony leaders. Friends, Daniel began, his voice carrying easily through the room. 6 months ago, we were thrown out of the assembly for the crime of thinking for ourselves. Today, we stand in a place that proves we were not the first to face this choice. He gestured to the walls around them. Whoever built these stations was also cast out, also rejected by those who feared change and independence. But look what they built. Look what they achieved. They created something better than what they left behind. An elderly Kepler survivor spoke up. What are you proposing, Mr. Hayes? I am proposing that we learn from their example, Daniel replied. The assembly expelled us because we believed in freedom, in the right of every being to choose their own path. Let us build a new organization based on those principles. Let us create something that welcomes diversity instead of fearing it. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had been studying the station records, stood up. I have been analyzing the data we found in the station computers. The original builders called themselves the Free Worlds Alliance. They were a group of species who rejected the control of some ancient galactic empire. They built these stations as a symbol of their independence. What happened to them? Someone asked. They grew, Jennifer replied. The records show that they eventually spread across dozens of star systems. They became explorers, inventors, traders. They never stopped growing, never stopped reaching for new horizons. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. And what happened to the empire that cast them out? Jennifer smiled. It collapsed under its own weight. Turns out that when you throw out all your best and brightest, all your innovators and free thinkers, you do not have much left. The room buzzed with excited conversation. Kate could see the same thought in everyone's faces. The assembly had made the same mistake as that ancient empire. They had expelled the very people who could have made them stronger. Daniel called for quiet. Then it is decided. We will build our own alliance, our own confederation of free worlds, and we will prove that diversity and freedom are not weaknesses to be feared, but strengths to be celebrated. As the meeting ended and people began to file out, Kate remained behind, looking out through the transparent walls at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the assembly continued its rigid rule over thousands of worlds. But here, in this ancient station built by other refugees, humanity and its allies were building something new, something better, something free. 2 years had passed since the humans found Haven Station, and Ryan Campbell could hardly believe how much had changed. He stood in the central command center of what was now the capital of human space, watching dozens of screens that showed construction projects happening all around the ancient station network. Ryan had been a city planner on Earth before the expulsion. Now he was the chief administrator of Haven Station, responsible for turning the alien ruins into a home for nearly 1 billion people. The work never stopped. Every day brought new challenges, new problems to solve, and new discoveries about the mysterious builders who had lived here before. "Mr. Campbell, we have another priority message from the research division," said his assistant, Lucy Martin. She was young, barely out of college when the evacuation happened, but she had proven herself invaluable in the chaos of building a new civilization. "What have they found now?" Ryan asked, taking the tablet she offered him. The message was from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the head of the xenoarchaeology team. She had been studying the original builders of the stations for 2 years, trying to understand who they were and what had happened to them. Her discoveries had been amazing, but also disturbing. 20 minutes later, Ryan walked into the research lab deep inside Haven Station. The lab was a mix of human technology and ancient alien systems that no one fully understood yet. Dr. Walsh stood in front of a huge holographic display showing star maps and alien writing. "Ryan, you need to see this," Jennifer said without looking away from the display. "I have been working on translating more of the builder records, and I found something incredible." The holographic display changed to show what looked like a historical timeline. The builders of these stations called themselves the Zanari. They were expelled from something called the First Galactic Union about 8,000 years ago. Ryan studied the display. "Expelled for what?" "The same things we were expelled for," Jennifer replied. "The records say they were too independent, too willing to question authority, too interested in exploring new ideas." "Sound familiar?" "Very familiar," Ryan said. "What happened to them?" Jennifer smiled. "They did exactly what we are doing. They built their own civilization, explored new worlds, developed new technologies. But here is the interesting part. They were not the only ones." The display changed again, showing a complex web of connections between different star systems. The Zanari made contact with dozens of other species that had been expelled from various galactic organizations throughout history. They formed alliances, traded knowledge, shared technologies. By the time they were done, they had built something much larger and more advanced than what they had been kicked out of. Ryan felt his heart racing. "Are you saying there are other civilizations out there? Other refugees like us?" "Not just other refugees," Jennifer said. "Active civilizations that might be willing to work with us. Look at this." She pressed a button and the display zoomed out to show a much larger section of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of various galactic organizations that had existed throughout history. Blue dots showed the civilizations built by their refugees. There were a lot more blue dots than red ones. "The pattern repeats over and over," Jennifer explained. "Large, controlling organizations rise to power. They expel anyone who thinks differently. Those refugees go on to build something better. Eventually, the original organizations collapse from their own rigidity, while the refugee civilizations thrive." "Have you told Admiral Sullivan about this?" Ryan asked. "Not yet. I wanted to confirm something first. I think the Zanari left us. More than just these stations. I think they left us a way to contact the current refugee civilizations." Ryan followed Jennifer deeper into the lab, where engineer Carlos Rivera was working on a massive piece of ancient technology. Carlos had been trying to understand the station systems for months, slowly figuring out how the alien technology worked. "Carlos, show him what we found," Jennifer said. Carlos wiped his hands on a rag and grinned. "Mr. Campbell, this is a long-range communication array like nothing we have ever seen. It can send messages across distances that would take our best ships years to travel. And it is still connected to a network, Carlos said. When I activated it yesterday, we started receiving signals from dozens of locations across the galaxy. Most of them are automated, but some are definitely coming from active civilizations. Ryan felt dizzy. You mean there are people out there trying to talk to us? Not just people, Jennifer said. Entire civilizations that were built by refugees. Like us. The Tau Confederation, the Free Worlds Alliance, the Independent Systems Coalition. All of them are descendants of species that were expelled from various galactic organizations. Over the next few days, Ryan watched as the communication array became the busiest place on Haven Station. Teams of linguists, scientists, and diplomats worked around the clock to decode the incoming messages and send replies. The first successful conversation was with the Tau Confederation, a group of 43 species that had been expelled from the Assembly's predecessor organization nearly 3,000 years ago. Their message was simple but powerful. Welcome to the family of the free. Captain Laura Knox of the patrol ship Defiant brought even more interesting news when she returned from a scouting mission to the border of Assembly space. Laura had been a fighter pilot before the expulsion, but now she commanded one of the ships protecting human territory. Admiral Sullivan, we have a situation, Laura reported during the weekly security briefing. Assembly ships have been testing our borders for the past month. They send in scouts, we chase them away, they come back a few days later. Are they planning to attack? Admiral Sullivan asked. I do not think so, Laura replied. At least not yet. But I think they are worried about something. My contacts in the Assembly military say there have been problems on several member worlds. Species asking questions about independence, demanding more rights, refusing to follow Assembly orders. Ryan realized what was happening. They are afraid. We might inspire others to leave. Exactly, Laura said. And from what I hear, they are right to be afraid. The Altair home system has formally requested to join our confederation. So have the mining colonies in the Vega sector. Even some of the Assembly's own member species are sending secret messages asking about membership. Admiral Sullivan leaned back in her chair. How many requests have we received? 17 formal applications for membership, Ryan answered, and twice that many informal inquiries. Admiral, we might need to start thinking about expansion. The meeting was interrupted when Lucy Martin burst into the room. I am sorry to interrupt, but we just received a priority message from the long-range array. It is from something called the Hegemony. The room fell silent. Ryan had never heard of the Hegemony, but something about the name made him nervous. Put it through, Admiral Sullivan ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a figure that was clearly not human, but not like any alien they had seen before. It seemed to be made of light and energy, rather than solid matter. Greetings, children of Earth, the figure said. Its voice was strange, like hearing someone speak through water. We are the Hegemony, and we have been watching your progress with great interest. Who are you? Admiral Sullivan asked. We are what you might become given time and wisdom, the figure replied. We are the descendants of the first refugees, the first species to reject the tyranny of galactic conformity. We have been waiting for new voices to join the chorus of freedom. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. What do you want from us? Nothing, the figure said. But we have something to offer you. Knowledge, technology, and most importantly, allies. The galaxy is about to change, and you humans have started that change. The old order is dying and something new must take its place. The transmission ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Admiral Sullivan was the first to speak. Well, this just got a lot more interesting. Ryan looked around the room at the faces of his colleagues. 2 years ago, they had been refugees, thrown out of galactic civilization with nowhere to go. Now they were at the center of something much larger, something that might reshape the entire galaxy. He thought about the ancient Zanari, who had faced the same choice thousands of years ago. They had chosen to build something new rather than accept defeat. Now it was humanity's turn to make that choice. And judging by the excitement in the room, Ryan knew what choice they would make. 5 years after the expulsion, Commander Steve Harrison walked quickly through the corridors of Haven Station toward the emergency council meeting. As head of Terran intelligence, he had been tracking the collapse of the Galactic Assembly for months, but the latest reports were beyond anything he had imagined. The council chamber was packed when Steve arrived. Admiral Sullivan sat at the head of the table, her face grim. Around her were the leaders of the Terran Confederation, including Ryan Campbell, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, and representatives from the allied species that had joined them over the past few years. "Steve, tell them what you told me," Admiral Sullivan said as he took his seat. Steve activated the holographic display in the center of the table. "The assembly is falling apart faster than we expected. In the past 6 months, 17 member species have formally requested to leave. 3 more have simply declared independence without asking permission. The Assembly Council is in constant session, but they cannot agree on how to respond." The display showed a map of assembly space with flashing red dots marking the rebellious worlds. The Vorthak Chancellor has been removed from power by his own people. The Zephyrian government is facing civil war. Even some of the core worlds are questioning assembly authority. "What triggered this?" asked President Daniel Hayes, who had been elected as the political leader of the Confederation 2 years earlier. "Us," Steve replied simply. "When we proved that expelled species could build something better than what they left behind, it changed everything. Every species that felt oppressed by assembly rule started asking why they needed the assembly at all." Dr. Patricia Morgan, the Confederation's chief medical officer, spoke up from her seat near the end of the table. "It gets worse. The Vorthak homeworld is suffering from a plague that their medical technology cannot cure. They have lost over 10 million people in the past month. Can we help them?" Daniel asked. "I have already developed a treatment using techniques we learned from studying Earth biodiversity," Patricia replied. "But assembly law forbids accepting aid from expelled species. Their pride is literally killing them." Admiral Sullivan leaned forward. "Steve, what is our military situation? If the assembly decides to blame us for their problems, are we ready for a fight?" "Better than ready," Steve answered. "Our fleet has grown to over 800 ships, including vessels from our new member species. More importantly, we have been in contact with the other refugee civilizations. The Tau Confederation has promised military support if we are attacked. So have the Free Worlds Alliance and the Independent Systems Coalition." The meeting was interrupted when Captain Tony Fletcher's image appeared on the main screen. Tony commanded the exploration ship Pioneer, which had been sent to investigate signals from the galactic core region. His face looked excited but also nervous. "President Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to hear this immediately," Tony said. "We have made contact with the hegemony." Everyone in the room leaned forward. The hegemony had sent them messages, before but always brief communications that revealed little about who they really were. "They want to meet with our leadership," Tony continued. "And sir, they are not what we expected. They are old, incredibly old. They say they have been watching galactic civilization for over 50,000 years. "Watching it?" Jennifer asked. "Why not participating in it?" Tony's image flickered as his ship's communication system struggled with the distance. "They say they have seen this cycle repeat dozens of times. Galactic organizations rise, become rigid and controlling, then collapse when their best people leave to build something better. They only make contact with civilizations that prove they can break the cycle." "And they think we have?" Daniel asked. "They think we are the ones who will finally break it permanently," Tony replied. "They want to offer us membership in something they call the True Alliance. Apparently, it is made up of all the civilizations that have successfully escaped the cycle of rise and fall." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Steve looked around the table at the faces of his colleagues. 5 years ago, they had been refugees fleeing into unknown space. Now they were being invited to join what sounded like the real power structure of the galaxy. "There is more," Steve said, calling up another display. "Our intelligence sources report that assembly military forces are massing for what they are calling Operation Restoration. They plan to attack Haven Station and force the rebellious worlds back into line." "How many ships?" Admiral Sullivan asked. Over 2,000, including their entire battle fleet, Steve replied. They are calling it the largest military operation in assembly history. Daniel stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at the bustling space around Haven Station. Hundreds of ships moved between the ancient stations, carrying people and goods between the growing worlds of the Confederation. Children of dozens of species played in the parks that human engineers had built inside the old alien structures. They are going to attack all of this because we dared to show people there was another way to live, Daniel said quietly. Yes, Steve replied. But we are not the same refugees who fled assembly space 5 years ago. We have allies now, advanced technology from the hegemony, and something the assembly lost long ago. What is that? Ryan asked. People who actually want to fight for what they believe in, Steve answered. Assembly soldiers fight because they are ordered to. Our people fight because they choose to. Dr. Jennifer Walsh activated her own display, showing the records of the ancient Zanari civilization. I have been studying the historical patterns, and there is something important we need to understand. Every time this cycle has repeated, the refugee civilizations eventually became the dominant power in the galaxy. The rigid organizations always collapse because they cannot adapt to change. You are saying we are going to win? Daniel asked. I am saying history is on our side, Jennifer replied. But that does not mean the transition will be easy. The assembly will fight hard to maintain their control, even if it destroys everything they claim to protect. Admiral Sullivan stood up. Then we better be ready for them. Steve, I want full mobilization of all Confederation forces. Contact our allies and request immediate military support, and get me a direct line to this hegemony. If they want to help us break the cycle, now would be a good time to start. As the meeting broke up and people hurried off to their various duties, Steve remained behind with Daniel and Admiral Sullivan. Through the window, they could see work crews installing new defensive systems on the outer stations. Everyone knew the fight was coming. Daniel, are we doing the right thing? Steve asked. When the assembly attacks, a lot of people are going to die. Maybe we should have tried harder to find a peaceful solution. Daniel turned from the window. Steve, 5 years ago they threw us out for the crime of believing in freedom. Since then, we have built a civilization that welcomes anyone who wants to live free. We have cured diseases they could not cure, solved problems they said were impossible, and shown the galaxy that there is an alternative to their rigid control. He gestured out at the stations around them. Look at what we have built. Look at the hope in the eyes of the people who come here seeking refuge from oppression. They are not attacking us because we did something wrong. They are attacking us because we proved them wrong. Admiral Sullivan nodded. The assembly had their chance to change, to adapt, to grow. Instead, they chose to double down on control and conformity. Now they will face the consequences of that choice. Steve looked out at the growing fleet of ships that surrounded Haven Station. Soon, those ships would face the largest military force the assembly had ever assembled. But for the first time since the crisis began, Steve felt confident about the outcome. The assembly was fighting to preserve the past. The Confederation was fighting for the future, and throughout galactic history, the future had always won in the end. The alarm bells rang through Haven Station as Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the flagship Determination, watching 2,000 assembly warships approach through deep space. The largest battle fleet in galactic history was coming, to destroy everything humanity had built. But Marcus felt strangely calm. All ships report ready for battle, reported Commander Gary Turner from his position at the communication station. The Confederation fleet stands at 600 ships, plus another 400 from our allied civilizations. Marcus nodded. They were outnumbered 2-1, but he had learned not to judge victory by numbers alone. The assembly fleet moved in perfect formation, every ship exactly where regulations said it should be. The Confederation fleet looked chaotic, by comparison with human ships mixed in with Kepler survivors, Altair merchants, and vessels from a dozen other species. Admiral, incoming transmission from the assembly flagship, Turner announced. The main screen flickered and showed the new Vorthak Supreme Commander, a massive insectoid being with scarred armor and cold black eyes. Admiral Webb, I am Supreme Commander Thaxos. You will surrender immediately and submit to Assembly justice, or we will destroy every ship and station in this system. Commander Thaxos, Marcus replied calmly. You are in Confederation space without permission. Leave now, and no one needs to get hurt. Your so-called Confederation is illegal, Thaxos snarled. The Assembly does not recognize your right to exist. Surrender now or face destruction. The Assembly expelled us, remember? Marcus said with a slight smile. You told us to leave your space and never come back. We did exactly what you asked. Now you want to follow us here and tell us how to live in our own home? Thaxos leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of his bridge. You have poisoned half the galaxy with your lies about freedom and independence. 17 worlds have left the Assembly because of your influence. This chaos ends today. Commander, those worlds did not leave because of us, Marcus replied. They left because you gave them the same choice you gave us. Submit to your control or get out. They chose freedom. The transmission ended abruptly. Marcus turned to his tactical officer, Captain Nicole Adams. Nicole, what is your assessment? Their formation is textbook perfect, Nicole replied, studying the enemy fleet on her screens. Every ship knows exactly what it is supposed to do, but that also means they cannot adapt quickly to unexpected situations. And our fleet? Complete chaos on paper, Nicole said with a grin. But every captain out there has been given the freedom to use their own judgment. When the shooting starts, we can adapt faster than they can give orders. The battle began when Assembly fighters launched their first attack wave. They came in perfect formation, just like their training manual said they should. But Captain Laura Knox, flying her fighter squadron from the carrier New Hope, had never read those manuals. She led her mixed squadron of human, Kepler, and Altair pilots in a weaving attack pattern that confused the Assembly fighters completely. Within minutes, the perfect Assembly formation was broken up into individual dogfights scattered across space. The Confederation pilots used their training from dozens of different worlds, combining human aggression with Kepler precision and Altair cunning. The Assembly pilots, trained to follow orders and stick to formation, could not adapt to the chaotic, individual combat. On the main battle line, the larger ships opened fire on each other with weapons that could crack planets. The Assembly fleet concentrated their fire on individual Confederation ships, trying to destroy them one by one. But Commander Tony Fletcher, now commanding the heavy cruiser Pioneer, had a different idea. All ships, target their command vessels. Tony broadcast to the Confederation fleet. Cut off their communications and they cannot coordinate their attacks. The strategy worked. While Assembly ships focused on destroying individual enemies, Confederation ships worked together to isolate and destroy the vessels that were giving orders to the Assembly fleet. Soon, entire sections of the enemy formation were operating without central command. The tide of battle turned when the hegemony ships arrived. They appeared without warning, materializing out of what looked like empty space. The hegemony vessels were unlike anything anyone had ever seen, looking more like sculptures made of light than actual spacecraft. This is the hegemony first speaker, came a voice over all communication channels. We formally recognize the Terran Confederation as the legitimate government of this region of space. Any continued aggression by Assembly forces will be met with our direct intervention. Supreme Commander Thaxos appeared on screen again, but this time he looked worried. The hegemony has no authority here. This is an internal Assembly matter. The hegemony has been watching galactic civilization for 50,000 years, the first speaker replied. We have seen this pattern repeat dozens of times. Rigid governments rise, suppress innovation and freedom, then fall when their best people leave to build something better. The Assembly has reached the end of this cycle. The hegemony ships began broadcasting something that made every Assembly vessel stop firing. It was not a weapon, but information. Historical records showing how the same cycle had repeated throughout galactic history. The rise and fall of the First Galactic Union, the Eternal Empire, the Cosmic Alliance, and dozens of other organizations that had tried to control the galaxy through rigid authority. Every time the refugees built something better, the first speaker continued. Every time the old order collapsed under its own weight, the assembly can choose to adapt and join the new order, or it can follow its predecessors into extinction. Ennui. Ships throughout the assembly fleet, crews were watching the historical records and realizing the truth. Their own government was repeating the same mistakes that had destroyed every previous galactic civilization. Some ships began leaving the battle zone, their crews refusing to fight for a dying system. Supreme Commander Thaxos made one last desperate attack, leading his personal squadron directly at Haven Station, but he never reached his target. Captain Nicole Adams intercepted him with the heavy cruiser Freedom, and in the brief battle that followed, the last Supreme Commander of the Galactic Assembly was destroyed along with his ship. The war was over, but the real change was just beginning. Over the following months, the Assembly government collapsed as member species left in massive numbers. Some joined the Terran Confederation, others formed their own independent governments, and a few tried to maintain smaller versions of the old assembly system. 5 years later, President Daniel Hayes stood before the First Galactic Congress in the same chamber where humanity had been expelled a decade earlier. But now the chamber was filled with representatives from over 300 independent worlds and civilizations, all working together as equals, rather than subjects of a central authority. 10 years ago, we were told that we did not belong among the stars, Daniel said to the assembled delegates. We were expelled for believing that every being has the right to choose their own path, make their own decisions, and build their own future. He gestured to the diverse crowd of beings around him. Today, we stand in a galaxy where that right is recognized and protected, where diversity is celebrated rather than feared, where innovation and growth are encouraged rather than suppressed. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, now elderly but still sharp, sat in the front row taking notes. Her research had shown that this was the first time in galactic history that the cycle had been permanently broken. Instead of one rigid organization being replaced by another, the galaxy had embraced the idea of voluntary cooperation between independent civilizations. In the observation gallery, Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the proceedings with satisfaction. The young officer who had led the human exodus was now an old woman, but she had lived to see humanity's greatest victory, not conquering the galaxy, but freeing it. After the Congress session ended, Daniel found himself standing at the same spot, where Captain Jake Morrison had been 10 years earlier, when humanity was expelled. A young reporter from one of the new independent worlds approached him. President Hayes, what do you think the expelled assembly leaders would say if they could see this? The reporter asked. Daniel smiled. I think they would finally understand that we were never the problem. We were the solution. They just could not see it at the time. As delegates from hundreds of worlds mingled in the Great Hall, sharing ideas and making plans for joint exploration missions to distant galaxies, Daniel reflected on how far they had all come. Humanity had been cast out for refusing to conform, and in response, they had built a galaxy where conformity was no longer required. The assembly had tried to maintain order through control. The new galactic civilization maintained peace through freedom, and for the first time in 50,000 years of galactic history, that freedom looked like it might last forever. Outside the Great Hall, ships from dozens of worlds prepared to depart for the edges of known space, carrying explorers and colonists to places no one had ever been before. The age of rigid control was over. The age of infinite possibility had begun.